Hello, everyone, and welcome to Indigitous Sessions. My name is Claire Angus. I'll be our host for today, and with our special guest, Karl Udy, speaking on a thoughtful moment on Google Analytics. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know about a couple details so that as you listen along, you can keep these things in mind. We will be recording the session, and so feel free to take notes if you'd like, but the material will be available after the session on our Indigitous YouTube channel. So you can always come back to that, send it to your friends if you find it helpful. The second thing is that we will be having some Q&A at the end of the session, and so as questions come up, as you're thinking through things as Karl shares, feel free to use the chat window in the GoToMeeting webinar service, and we will be taking those questions at the end. So there will be a lot of material covered, so feel free just as you go to add those questions to the chat box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the very end. So with a little bit of housekeeping out of the way, I want to introduce Karl. Karl is from New Zealand. He is a Kiwi, and he has been working in ministry for over 20 years, has a lot of experience, and he serves Indigitous as our Google Analytics expert. He walks us through all kinds of analysis of GodTools, WatchThinkChat, some of the other tools that we've been developing as an Indigitous group. And so he's been very, very helpful for our team. He's been very helpful for others who have benefited from his expertise. And I think he'll be very helpful for you. So with no further ado, I want to turn it over to Karl and hear what he has to share with us about an introduction to Google Analytics.
Thanks, Claire, and it's a real privilege to be able to be sharing here with all of you about Google Analytics. And it's a bit of a background as to how I ended up doing this. When I was at university or college, I did do a degree in mathematics and statistics, but throughout my time in ministry, that's been something that actually took a back seat for a lot of the time. But over the past few years, I've found more and more that I've been in positions where I've been given the opportunity to take a look at our ministry statistics and to find out meaningful information about them. And that's been something which I've found that it just seems to fit well with the way that my mind works. And during this past year, when I've been on the Global Digital Strategies team here in Orlando, I've found that people have come and asked me what I think about this data or that data. And it's been really enlightening, the sorts of things that we've found out. And today we're going to have a chance to show you some of the things that we've found out through taking a look at the Google Analytics. So as we begin, I just want to mention that we do have a poll here for you, asking you what your experience is with Google Analytics. This session is designed not for people who are experts in Google Analytics, but for people who are new. So if you haven't used Google Analytics before, then this will hopefully be just for you. Or if you've used it, but you found it a little bit overwhelming, things have been a bit scary, then again, this is for you. So this is Google Analytics for absolute beginners and for those who want to teach them. So also, one thing I want to let you know is that as we're looking through this session today, we're going to be taking a look at some of the live Google Analytics for our sites. So we'll be having a look at live data together, and so hopefully you'll be able to see the things that I'm doing, and you'll be able to do those same exact things with your web assets or mobile assets later. So what is analytics? Analytics is the discovery and communication of meaningful patterns in data. So in terms of discovery, does looking at pages of data make you feel like you're in the Matrix and you have none of the powers of Neo? Analytics is about looking at, investigating, and arranging the data so that we can discover these meaningful patterns within it. And I know that if your mind isn't geared to think about numbers, that can be a bit scary, a bit overwhelming at times. And so that's why another part of the analytics is also the communication of meaningful patterns in data. And so one of the things that I want to be able to do whenever I'm discovering things in the analytics is I want to be able to communicate them in a way that someone who perhaps doesn't have a numbers mind is able to easily understand and see what the meaningful patterns that we're looking for are. And so often that will mean graphs and charts, but it might also mean a turn of phrase that helps people understand a situation, such as right now more people have access to a mobile phone than to a toothbrush. A very simple turn of phrase that people get what it means. And in terms of meaningful data, it's important that we look for the patterns that are meaningful. Now, as you can tell, there is absolutely no meaning that connects the number of people who died by becoming tangled in their bed sheets with total revenue generated by skiing facilities in the US. It is a spurious connection that we have between those two data points there. And so for you all, even though you may be a beginner and new in taking a look at analytics or Google Analytics, I am anticipating that you will be subject matter experts for the sort of things that you will be putting on the internet, that you will have on your website or on your mobile app. And so you will know what sort of things should connect, what sort of things should make sense when they go together. And so you want to see how they connect in a meaningful way. So why is analytics important? Well, first of all, it helps us to understand better what results we're getting. By taking a look at the analytics, we can actually know if people are, for example, looking at certain web pages on our site or not. We can know where they come from. We can know what sort of visitors they are. We can have an idea of what sort of things they're doing. It also helps us to see the relationships between different variables and behaviors. And so we're going to have a look at some things today that have helped us to make decisions about how we're going to act and use our tools in the digital world. But before we get any further, I want to give some caveats. So analytics only tells us what is recorded from the web app or activity. You cannot know what someone is doing apart from the fact that certain buttons are being clicked or things are being typed on their keyboard. A long page view may simply be because someone was interrupted by a phone call or someone at the door. It's impossible for us to know, in most cases, what is actually happening on the other end of the screen. But if we have expert knowledge of our field and enough data, we can infer with some confidence that most interactions of a certain type have a certain meaning. We just need to remember that in most cases that meaning will be a bit less specific than what we've designed our website or our mobile app to do. As an example, one of the tools we'll look at the analytics for today will be the mobile app GodTools, which includes gospel presentations. Now, even if the app had a button where people could tap to indicate a decision to trust Jesus as their Savior, we could never know what someone's intentions were. And these might not necessarily be deceptive intentions. It's quite likely that on that app, someone would tap such a button as part of exploring the app to see where all the pathways within the app led. Now, that may initially look to us just like someone has indicated that they have made a decision to trust Christ. But we need to understand that that might not necessarily be the case. We also need to remember that correlation does not mean causation. Two variables may be correlated because of a third factor that influences them both, or it may be one of those spurious connections. So as we prepare to actually get into Google Analytics, I want to give you a brief overview of what we're going to cover. I'll give you an overview of some of the most important features of the Google Analytics dashboard, and I will introduce two simple and powerful tools within Google Analytics: segments and goals. Okay, so let's get underway. So here we're taking a look at the Indigitous.org dashboard. And if you take a look down on the left-hand side, you'll see there's a menu there, and you'll see that there are a bunch of different tabs. You've got dashboards, shortcuts, intelligence events, real-time, audience, acquisition, behavior, and conversions. And today we're going to take a look at the last, and we'll start off by taking a look at the overview of the audience there. And the first thing that I want you to take a look at is the date here. Now, when you see this line graph down here in the middle, which has all of our daily number of sessions on here, you can see that it's very difficult to actually derive any meaning from what is happening here. So what I'm going to do, first of all, is I'm going to go and extend our date range all the way back to June 2013 up to today, and I will apply that. Now you can see a very different line graph there now, and right away you can see some things that make you think, what's that? You can see a peak here that's right on Wednesday, October 2nd, and you can see another peak here on January 7th, 2014. Now, when we see these things, we think, what happened there? And so we're going to want to find out. Now, when we took a look at this data, we found out that they were from some paid Facebook campaigns that we did, and so we got a lot of interaction on the Indigitous.org website from these two promoted posts that we had on those days. Looking down further through the rest of the dashboard here, I want to just explain some of the terms here. So here we have sessions. This is a total number of sessions within a date range. A session is a period, time a user is actively engaged with your website, app, etc. So in a simple idea, this is a number of visits that you have to your website, will be a simple way of thinking about it. Whereas the users here is the number of people that have had at least one session within a selected date range. Then the page views is the total number of pages that are viewed. So repeated views of a single page are counted. That means if someone goes to a page, and then they go to another page, and then they come back to that original page again, then that counts as 2 page views. And then you have down here, you have pages per session. And this tells you the average for each session of how many pages are viewed. And so we have, for Indigitous.org, an average of 1.82 pages per session. So that probably means that there's a lot of people that are just having one page view, and that maybe getting close to half the people are having more, but because there'll be some that might be having 10, 20 page views, the number ends up being somewhere around there, but this is the average. And then we have the average session duration. This is the average length of time that someone stays on our website before they leave. And then we have our bounce rate here. Now you may have heard bounce rate mentioned before. The bounce rate is the percentage of sessions that include only one page view. So these are people that come to your website, to one page on there, and they do not click or visit any other page in your website before leaving. And then down here we have the percentage of new sessions, and so 55% of all of the sessions over this time range were from people who were visiting for the first time. And so you can see they've got a nice pie graph over here showing that 55% of new visitors there and the 44% of returning visitors. So let's take a look a bit further down here, and under audience you can see that there are a lot of other things here, but the first one I want to take a look at here is the geo, and then under geo we have language and location. I want to have a look at location. Now what we have here is we have a heat map of the world showing which countries most of our visitors come from. And so you can see there the thing that stands out is the United States is a lot darker blue, so we have a lot more visits from the United States than from any other single country. Now we can also, down here, we can change the dimensions that we're measuring it from. At the moment it's measuring country. You can change it to subcontinent or to continent, or you can change it to city. When you change it to city, you get a bubble map instead. And so you can see there some cities that are a lot bigger, that have a lot bigger bubbles, they have a lot more visitors than others. So you can see there, that looks like it's probably Ethiopia there. This looks like it might be Hong Kong, and I think that big one there might be Orlando. And so going on further here, we have behavior. And now be careful here because there is a behavior tab underneath audience, but also down near the bottom there is another top level behavior one. But we're taking a look at the behavior under audience here, and the first thing we'll look at here is the new versus returning. And so what this does is it shows us that splits up the new visitors and the returning visitors and gives us the information on the sessions, percentage of new sessions, new users, bounce rate, pages per session, average session duration. So it gives us a lot of this information split up by new visitor and returning visitor. This can be useful if you want to see how people interact with your website on the first visit as compared with interacting it on returning visits. Also under behavior we have frequency and recency. And so we have here a bar graph which shows how many of our users each have a different count of sessions. So there have been over this time period about 25,000 people who have had just one session, and then you can see things tail off so that there are less and less people who have had more and more sessions. Now don't get caught out by the fact that down here the numbers or the bars get a bit higher. The reason is because at exactly that point it starts combining different counts of sessions. So it is not just a count of 9 sessions here, but it's a count of 9 and 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 here. So when you initially look at the graph here, it looks as though, wow, there are a bunch of people that are really heavy users down here. But this is just a deceptive presentation of the data here. Now, as well as count of sessions, which give us an idea of whether people are coming back to our site again and again, also at the top here there is the days since the last session. And that has a similar that has a similar pattern in terms of how it presents the data to the count of sessions. But what this shows is how long people tend to go in between visits to our website. And so you may have a website where people come back on a rhythm, like they will come back for a new post, to read a new post every Monday, in which case you might see a bump here around the 7. For us, obviously, again, it follows a similar sort of pattern with that steady decline down there. Now, for engagement is measuring how much people actually interact with our website. And you can see one of the issues we have here is that by far most people interact at the 0 to 10 second rate. And we want people obviously to spend more time on our website. Again, be careful because the ranges go up. The first one lasts 10 seconds, then 20, then 30, then 120. But you want people to be spending, in most cases, more time on your website. Unless you have a very simple website where you want people to do something very quickly and go, in which case a longer time on there may indicate a problem that your users are having. Also on the engagement, you can have a look at page depth. In other words, how many pages people typically look at when they come to visit your website. And so again, you have that bar graph there showing how many pages they look at. Now, we've taken a look at a bunch of things here in the audience tab. So there may be some questions that you have about that. So if you do have some questions, you can type those into the chat now. We'll deal with all of the questions at the end, so hopefully your question will be dealt with at the very end, but we won't be stopping now for questions. We'll be moving on to the next part. And the next part is acquisition. Acquisition helps us to know how people come to our website. And so you'll see here with the overview, we have a pie chart here with 7 categories. Now, direct, these are visits that have come to your website by people typing in the name to the browser. So there's 40% of direct here are people that have typed in indigitous.org into their browser and they have come to our website in that way. We also have organic search. This is from people that have used a search engine such as Google, and Indigitous has come up as a result on there, as a not as a paid result, but as a as one of the general Google calculated search responses there. There is also paid search, and that may be an option if you're using Google AdWords or something like that. Then you may find that you're getting some results with paid search as well. Social. Social are the visits that come from links within social media, such as Twitter or Facebook. Referral are visits that come from links on websites. So anytime someone has a hot link with indigitous.org on a website and that brings them to Indigitous, then that will turn up as a referral for us. Email. Email is when people have the indigitous.org link in an email, and so it is hot linked there, and so that will open up their browser and bring them to indigitous.org. And then other is anything else. Now, as we take a look at this, we want to take a look under all traffic and under referrals. Now, what we can see on here is we can see all of the websites that send people to Indigitous. Now, you can see that there are only 10 there. Down the bottom over here on the right, you can change the number of rows that it will show. And I will often put this up to 100 or more so I can scroll through and see how many we have there and where they're all coming from, and we'll get down to very small numbers down the bottom. As you can see, for Indigitous, most of our referrals are coming from social media. So we can see facebook.com, m.facebook.com, which is Facebook's mobile app, and t.co, which is Twitter. These are our three big referrers. So most of the people that are coming to Indigitous.org from from outside are coming via a social media link on Facebook or Twitter. Now, if you have any questions about acquisition, now will be a good time to type that question into the chat, and hopefully we can answer your question later. But this is going to be all I'm going to have a look at for acquisition right now as I move down to the behavior tab down here. Now, the first thing that I'm going to take a look at behavior, which is the behavior tab covers all of the things about what people do when they're actually on our website or they're in your mobile app. So the first thing I'll have a look at here is behavior flow. Now, behavior flow is useful to see what pathways people are using in your website. And so it will show a sort of a pipeline of from a landing page of where people get to your website. It will show you in these red things here how many people drop off and leave your website at a certain point. And so you can see what are the dominant pathways that people are actually using to get through your website or through your mobile app. And you may find that you have designed your website or your mobile app with a certain pathway in mind, and by taking a look at this you can see how that pathway is actually doing, or you can see if people are actually using another pathway to do things. And if there is another pathway that people are finding that is more natural, that fits them better, then you can cater to the way that people are doing things and set up your interactions on your website to be able to meet them where they're at. Now, the other thing that we're going to take a look here under behavior is we're going to take a look at site content and all pages. And this, again, gives us a list of what pages people are visiting on Indigitous.org. And again, I can increase that so that we can see more than the default 10 pages there. And so in taking a look at this, we can see that by far the most common page that's visited is our Indigitous.org homepage. And that is probably to be expected for most websites. But the interesting thing is we take a look down here, and this was something that that helped us think about how we wanted to make Indigitous.org work better, was that the most common ways that people were using our website, aside from just coming to the homepage, were all to do with events that we had running. So we had a conference in Waterloo, a conference in Addis Ababa, a conference in Amsterdam, a conference in Hong Kong. Again, we had a conference in Bangalore, one in Panama City, Spring 2014 events. So 7 out of our 10 top 10 were all to do with our events. And so this made us stop and think about, well, is this what we really want Indigitous.org to be? Is it just a place for people to come and find out about events and to sign up for them? And we really want Indigitous.org to be much more than that. And so that has been behind the changes which we've made recently to Indigitous.org to change it so it can be more of a community place. And so these changes have been in part informed by us taking a look and seeing what our website has been doing for us up until now. And so there are a lot more things in here under behavior, but I'm not going to look at these right now. So in terms of the things that I've showed you so far down the sidebar, these are probably the main things that as a beginner you want to be aware of. What I want to do now is I want to take a look at a couple of tools that are here in Google Analytics that a lot of people are not aware of. And so the first one is segments. And so segments allow you to compare a subset of users or sessions with others or with the whole set. And so you can see that we have here all sessions, which is 100%, and we can add a segment. Now I'm going to go to another website here and take a look at the analytics to add a segment, and we're going to add a segment together. So I'm going to show you how to add a segment here. Now this is for crew.org, and so for this, so I have clicked here on add a segment, and now I'm going to click on new segment. Now one of the things that is interesting about crew.org is that one of the main things that people are visiting crew.org for is for information about fasting and prayer. And so we're going to take a look at who exactly is visiting about fasting and prayer. And so I have named this segment fasting. Now I'm going to go down to conditions down here, and I'm going to add a condition. So I want to filter the sessions. You can choose to filter by sessions or by users, but I'm going to filter by sessions. And then I'm going to choose the category that I want to have a look at here. And so I'm going to take a look under behavior, and I'm going to find page title down here. There's page title, and I'm going to take a look at page title contains fast or fasting, and that is going to be the total of the conditions there. You can see over on the right hand side it says that that is 22.92% of users, which is quite fascinating that that many percent of visitors to crew.org are taking a look at a page that has something to do with fasting. Okay, so I'm going to save this segment now. And so there we have fasting as our segment there. Now you can have more than one segment, and so you could choose another one. And so I have one that I've already included here, and so I will add this one as well. So this one includes fasting, but it is non-US data. And so we can compare there the global overall with the non-US data. Now, where things get interesting here, we can take a look at location. And we can see here that we have two very different graphs here. I'm just going to drop off this one here now, so that we're just taking a look at one map. Now again, we're seeing the US is dominating, but what we can do is we can click on the country there, And then when we click on the country, it will now give us, it breaks it down in the US by states. And you can then go and change the dimensions down here from region to which is state for the US, but it'll be province for Canada, or different things for different countries. And you can even take a look at metro, which is quite a useful thing. And so there you can see the different cities where there are more people that are visiting there are more people visiting for prayer and fasting. Now, where things get really interesting, though, if we go back and we go back to looking at the non-US data, I'm going to remove this one here. So this segment is exactly the same as the previous segment, but I excluded all of the US. Now here we can see some interesting countries that are standing out as having a lot more visits to do with prayer and fasting. And for me, when I take a look at this, one of the things that stands out more clearly than anything else is there's this very bright blue down here in South Africa. And so I click down here in South Africa to see what's that. Requested map does not exist. It did exist yesterday. I can, what I can tell you with this is that when you click on here in South Africa, there is one province in South Africa, the Gauteng province, which has a very similar dark blue compared to the rest of South Africa for the prayer and fasting. And then I was able to go and dig down on that even further, and I was able to find that per capita in Johannesburg, there are 3 times as many visitors to the prayer and fasting pages per capita in Johannesburg than is normal for everywhere else around the world. And this makes me ask, what is God doing with prayer and fasting in Johannesburg? Because it looks as though something really special is happening there. And so these are the sorts of things that you can find out by taking a look at the analytics. And so that hopefully is a good overview of how you can use segments. If you have any questions, again, now would be a good time to put them in. What I want to do now we're going to take a look at another tool here. We're going to take a look at GodTools, and we're going to use this to take a look down at the bottom here under conversions. Now, and under conversions, we're going to take a look at goals, and we're going to take a look at the goal screens. Now, GodTools is a mobile app that has 2 gospel presentations, the Knowing God Personally gospel presentation and the 4 spiritual laws. And it also has the Satisfied presentation, and it has every student articles on there as well. And we have set up a goal for every page in the first 3 presentations. And the reasoning behind that was that we wanted to know where people were dropping off in the process. And so the best way to do that initially was to set up a goal at each page. But we're also really interested in how many and how many people actually got through the booklet to a point where they could make a decision. And so those two were KGP 7 and 4 laws 6. And what I did so I could separate those apart was I gave those a monetary value of $1 for each, so just for the simple reason that that would allow me to have a count of how many times people got to that point involved. It's just a way to make it count it for me. Now, I want to go through here how we make a goal. So to make a goal, you need to go right to the very top. You've got home, reporting, customization, admin, and you need to click on admin, and then over on the right hand side you've got goals, and then you can click on new goal. Now for these goals, the way that I did them was I followed the create an account acquisition pathway here in the template, because I figured that for the create an account, that their thinking behind that would be someone will get to a page where they have their account created, which was similar to what I'm thinking, where I want to see where people get to a certain page. And so then I go to the next step, and I see there that they've got down here destination, which is what we're looking for. So we've got a destination here that someone can get to. And so I can create the name here of what I want to call it. I'll just call it test for now. And then in destination, I can give the name of the app screen name or web page URL for the page that I want people to that I want to measure people going to. You can then verify this goal to see if it would make sense, and so I can just type in here KGP 7, which is the same as one of the ones I've got before. I can verify that, and it tells me that this goal would have an 8.89% conversion rate based on your data from the past 7 days. So if you go through it and it says it will have a 0% conversion rate, and you think that that does not make sense with your data, then you've probably made some mistake, most likely in a typing error in the actual name of your screen or URL, and you can go back and find out where that error is and change it until you can verify it to get an actual percentage here that makes sense. We're not going to create a goal right now though, because we already have this goal created, so I'm going to cancel here, and I'm going to go back here to the goals. Now, okay, before we get into the application, now is a good time for your questions. So I'm going to go back to Claire. What questions have we had that have come in?
Thanks, Carl. Wow, that was a lot of great information and a lot of digging down into some tools that'll be really helpful. We do have quite a few questions, and so we'll jump right into that. The first one is really kind of for somebody who's getting started with Google Analytics. What's even the process to get access to that? How do you install it or set it up on a property that you might have?
Okay. Google has really great tutorials. Now, to install Google Analytics, it is there will be a small Java applet that you can install. If you are using a WordPress site, then you can download a plugin for Google Analytics, and so you go into WordPress and then plugins, and there'll be Google Analytics, and you'll be able to download a plugin that way. And so the two most likely ways you would do it would be either through a plugin with Google Analytics or through a Java applet, and that's just a really simple line of code that will be put usually at the top level of your website. And so if you know enough about creating websites, then hopefully you'll know what I mean. If you don't know enough about that, then you'll want to find someone that does to help you to put that line of code there at the top level. And it's important it's at the top level, because if it's not, then it will not record everything for all of your pages. And so that line of code will then send the information to Google Analytics, and if you already have a Google account, then you'll be able to sign into Google Analytics and see the data that comes in through that.
Okay, so it sounds like you look for a plugin, and if you kind of know a good amount about running your own site, even just kind of Googling that, or if it's not WordPress, there might be another kind of variation. And if you get stuck, it's a good idea to talk to somebody who knows a little bit about how to set that up.
Yes.
Find somebody who works with websites to help.
That's right. It's a very quick process if you know how, or if it's set up within something like WordPress. It's a very quick process. But if you don't know where to look or how to do it, then there are lots of ways you could do it wrong.
Okay. Thanks. So next question is, you were going through the user count, and that is that based on device? So if you had potentially one person logging in through a laptop, through an iPad, through a phone, would that count as 3 separate users in that case?
I think it would count as 3 separate users. Now, one of the things that we did not look at is that you can take a look under audience, under technology, mobile, so you can see what devices people are using and things like that. And so the users should be split out. So we can see here we have mobile, we have desktop, mobile, and tablet. So this tells us how many people are using desktops, how many people are using phones, how many people are using tablets. I'm pretty confident that they are all separated. So if someone is using it on their iPad, their phone, and their computer, that they will count as 3 separate users. And again, this is exactly one of these things that I was talking about at the caveat at the beginning. You don't know, like for example, if a friend or a family member uses a device or a computer, you cannot know that is a different person or not. Google Analytics will not differentiate between that if it is a shared device. So that is one of the things where you do need to have some caution for.
Great. We had a couple of different questions on what you're talking about, referral traffic.
Yes.
One being, and maybe you can try to address both of these at once. One is if there's a specific way to track people coming from apps, if an app has a link to a particular page or something along those lines. And then another, just kind of asking advice, if I were to invite somebody to the site, I really want to track kind of where they're coming from. Should I add something to the URL of that page, or somehow set up something so that I can know where that person came from?
Okay. In terms of apps, I do not know that there is something specific with apps, or whether it would come as a general under the referrals. I have not seen anything with apps, but I have not looked for it. In terms of knowing exactly where people come from, the best way to do that would be with what's called an affiliate link, and a lot of larger web presences use that. Like, for example, Amazon is probably one of the most famous ones, where you can, if you sign up as an Amazon affiliate, you can send your specialized affiliate link and post that on your website, and then if anyone clicks on that and then goes and buys that particular product on Amazon, you get a little slice of the pie, or slice of the profit, as a kickback as being an affiliate. So there are ways that you can do things in terms of having customized affiliate links. In terms of setting that up, that's not really a beginner thing. It's quite advanced.
Yeah, thanks, Karl. There's just so much more to dive into with this. So this is I know, just scratching the surface. Okay, so kind of getting into maybe a practical application. Somebody's asking, if I have a follow-up center that I want people to go to digitally after going through like the Knowing God Personally or some kind of gospel presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Do they simply enter a link into the goal path box? Could you kind of review again how you might set up specifically wanting to find out information about maybe a specific example of tracking a follow-through on a particular goal?
Okay, so for that, let's go. So we want to go over to our admin link here, into goals here. We can set up a new goal. Now, there are a lot of different templates that we can use, and you can even have a custom one. And so if we click on custom, then we can give it a destination, duration, pages, screen session per or event, in terms of things that we do. ABC here. We can give details there about different things that we can do there. I'm just seeing if I can find in here an option of setting up a pathway. No, the pathway isn't here. The pathway is actually back in the reporting. Under conversions, under goals, you can see your reverse goal path. And so when someone gets to your goal completion, you can see what steps they took to get there. And so this is, I think, if I'm understanding the question correctly, this is the best way that you can do it, is by setting up your goal for what you want people to do, and then taking a look and seeing what ways people use to get there. And then when you know how people get there, you can see if those pathways that you've set up are actually helping you to get there or not. Has that answered what the question is, do you think, Claire?
Yeah, I think that gives us a good sense of kind of where to dig in deeper, and just even kind of raising it up a level of just, using information to make informed decisions. And we can set up hypotheses, or we think that this is the best way to move people towards this goal, and then this seems like it'll really help measure, well, is our hypothesis correct, and
Yeah.
what else might people be doing, just even as you mentioned, oh, well, there's a lot of prayer happening or fasting searching for fasting and prayer in Johannesburg. Well, that's interesting. You know, what else might we do with that? And actually, with one really quick question on that one is just, you know, you talked about the per capita number of visitors from Johannesburg. Is that something that Google Analytics provided, or is that something that you kind of calculated?
No, I went to Wikipedia, and
Okay.
I found the population for the 11 largest cities, and I had the visits for fasting over a certain time period, and then I identified it's the visits per 1,000 population over that time period, and there were 3 cities here: Johannesburg, Atlanta, and Pretoria, that just really stood out. And it was just fascinating for me seeing that these cities had such a different behavior in terms of interacting with the site than other cities. And it really makes me want to know what's going on there.
Yeah. I think last question is another sort of combined question, just going back to what you shared about segments. And so there were 2 quick questions on that. One was, you know, as you set up the segments, are they then saved and you can kind of automatically come back to them and check in the future? It was the first question. And the second one is if you could just really briefly show how you might exclude certain countries, or, you know, you had the fasting excluding the US. How do you do that?
Okay, so as you can see here, I have lots and lots of different segments here. Now, there will be some segments that come as default segments that you can look at. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a new segment here, and I'm going to do a condition here, and I'm going to have sessions, and I'm going to have a look at users here, and so this is this exact example you're talking about. So I found under users, I found country, and I can put does not exactly match United States. Add filter. Sorry, not add filter, and then type in here the name, non-US, save it. And so this is the non-US data. What I'm going to do here, just to check to make sure that I've done it right, I'm going to go audience, geo, location, and the US is coming up as a 0, so I must have done that right. So it's always good to go and check to make sure that when you've done one of these segments that it has given you what you expect, and so it has in this case, and so that's very simple. Hopefully you're able to follow that. So so just quickly again, you open the segment, you do new segment, down in conditions, you can filter by sessions or users, and there are dozens of different options you can have there. The different categories will usually correlate to the things down the left-hand side. Users will correlate to things that have to do with audience. Behavior will correlate to things to do with behavior, and so on there. So because the stuff about geolocation is under audience, I went to look under users, and I found country as one of the options there, and then it gives me lots of options for what to do with it. So I can you can even make a whole list of different countries that you don't want it to include, and so on like that. And then once you've done that, you can name it, save it, and it's all there for you.
Thanks, Karl. That's awesome. It just seems like there's so much here, and first thing seems like just to kind of maybe explore around and just look at all the options and all the configurations that Google's built in with their analytics tool. It just seems like you could get lost in there a little bit. So for I know I'm going to probably try to learn a little bit more and just kind of look in and say, hey, what could I even learn, and the things that I wouldn't even think that I could segment out. So this is just a really powerful tool for helping us refine our strategies, and really appreciate you taking the time today to share your knowledge with us. And we still have lots of questions that we weren't able to get to, so this clearly kind of scratched the surface and raised a lot more issues. So as you guys have more questions, we do need to wrap up for today, but feel free to post those anywhere on our Indigitous YouTube channel as we post this, the session shortly after we're done, and or our Facebook group, Facebook page, indigitous.org. You can also find other information about blog posts, upcoming sessions, events, all kinds of other things. So if you haven't checked out indigitous.org, be sure to do that. We do want to let you know that we have another session coming up next month on May 7th. And the title of that is going to be Why Ramad Comes to Faith and Abdul Does Not. And it is a talk on spiritual pathways in high-level decision-making. And so we're going to be hearing from Frank Preston, who's done quite a bit of research on looking into what happens as people engage in the process of coming to faith, and using data and analytics, as well as really applying those in helpful and practical ways to help people as they move toward Christ. So you'll want to tune in for that. That'll be May 7th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Thanks again, Karl. We really, really appreciate you being with us, and thanks to all of you for joining us. And we will see you next time on Indigitous Sessions.